But for me, yeah, totally. But for me, this is for me only and a few other sensible people in the audience. There's something that is beautiful about it, because what I find for myself, I have to throw that in every time now, is I find that I breathe out a little bit. I find that I tend to move a little bit slower. I tend that the anxiety which is sort of underlying a lot of life seems to disappear. And for me, when I'm sitting around a fire and I've been chilling out for a few days, creativity seems to re-emerge and clarity on some things seem to grow, and things that I want to proactively pursue come to the forefront instead of just reacting to things that pop up in my life at other times. And what is simple and dirty and rugged is actually, for me, I'll say it again, for me, again, day spa, Fiji, but you can have your own ones of these. For me, there's a simplicity, but it's actually quite deep. And there's just something that's easy about it, but it's also quite profound. I'm not sure if you know it, there's a sketch, Picasso did these sketches of the bull. Does anyone know this? And there were a series of sketches, and it starts off with a detailed picture of a bull. And it's intricate in its details, it's got the horns, the hair, the eyes, and it looks like a bull. And then the sketches progress, going simpler and simpler and simpler until you get just the line sketch of a bull in its bare essence. And it's taught in schools of finding out the bare elements, the simpleness of a complex structure, and how can you capture this complex thing in such a simple, beautiful way. And it's just a line drawing. It's actually taught by Apple to all their product engineers to help them learn the beauty of simpleness and without diluting what the thing truly is. We're starting this new series, and it's called Bless. You can see it right there. And part of it is for us in our Christian faith and us in our Christian walk, not to get caught up in the complexity of what life often does. We do this in our faith as well. We can make our faith quite complex. Things that we need to go to, thing after thing after thing, things we need to do, KPIs we need to achieve, over-analysis of things we're doing. How am I going? Where am I up to? It can get quite complex. But when I see Jesus and he talks about loving God and loving neighbor, it seems quite simple. And so my prayer as we go into this journey over the next 6 or 7 weeks is that it'll be a chance like what I get from camping to be still and just know that God is God. I pray that it'll bring clarity to your Christian walk. I pray that your Christian faith will just be a simple response of love from God in your life to those around you. I pray that you'll have a framework which can actually be practically lived out. So many times I know in my faith, I'm left with actually, what does this mean tomorrow? I actually don't really know. My prayer is that as we look at the person of Jesus, that we'll just be met with this beautiful, clear line drawing of the bull for our faith, and it will guide us. In this complex time, the world at the moment is complex. There's volatility, there's political things, there's global things, there's financial things, there's a lot going on. And my prayer is that for us, that we'll just have this simple rock to stand on, that we'll receive from him, and from that we'll love those around us. It's going to bring a picture up on the screen. It's one of those classic beautiful pictures of the place that we live. Taken probably from a helicopter that high, maybe a drone. But it's stunning, it's beautiful. And I wonder, when you look at that picture and yell out your answers, what do you see?
Blue water?
Blue water. It is blue water. I think there's a bit of a fake filter on this photo. So a bit of Bondi blue is a little bit bluer than normal. Yeah.
I see bricks.
The sea bricks. There are a fair few bricks there, aren't there? What else do we see? No whispering ladies, share with everyone, please. What do you see, Narita?
So maybe my future place.
Maybe. Yes. Do you want to claim it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I see my history of renting around Bondi. Like, yeah. Can anyone see their house? Or future houses, go with future houses then. What else do people see? Sky, a lot of beautiful sky.
City.
The city, yeah. Amazing. Something unique about Bondi, it's one of the closest main beaches to a CBD district in the globe. And that's why a lot of international travellers love it. They go, I can work in the city and 7 kilometres away I can be at the beach, even though it takes 45 minutes to do that. 7 kilometres. I wonder if we flip the question when we see all those things. What do you, and it's one of those questions, when God looks at that, what do you think God sees? When God gazes on his creation and his people and the land that he made that we're built on top of. I wonder what you think God sees. I know what God sees, and I know God sees each and every single human being that lives there. He can see past the bricks. We look at the fancy house and go, that's a fancy house, but God can see past that with his special vision and see each human life and their story and what's going on, and also knows their future. God sees the families, but he also sees the brokenness and the lostness and the hurt and the loneliness and the addiction and the pain. He also sees the beauty. I know he sees his church, even though we can't see our church buildings unless we get really close there, but there are church buildings scattered through there who are gathering and are shining light in this area, which is hard to shine when everything is so shiny, but it's a different shine. But he also sees each of us and each of his people across all the different churches who he has placed there. We'll go to the next screen. Thanks, Levi. And there's this verse that we had read out. And many of you, I'm sure you're aware of this. And this is God interacting with Abram back in Genesis. And this comes right after we've had creation, we've had the fall, we've had the flood, we've had Babel, and then right after that, we are introduced to Abram. And God says these things. And just before it, we see that Abram's with his family, with his dad, Petra. And we see here that the Lord said to Abram, go from your country, from your people, from your father's household, to the land I will show you. He's saying, go. And obviously in going, there is a lot of leaving. You're leaving your father's household, which also means you're leaving your family, your land, your inheritance. It's a pretty big call. It's to lead and to go. It's walking away from that. So imagine you're in a family and there's inheritance and there's land and there's farms, and then someone says, go, leave it. And you're not coming back for it. Probably raise a few questions. Like if you're doing the analysis of it all, you're probably like, So what does God speak into this? He literally says, underline there, I will make you into a great nation. Remembering Abraham and Sarah are struggling to have children. Walk away from everything, battle of fertility, and go, and I will make you into a great nation, but I can't even have a child. And I will bless you. And that word bless, we use it all the time, like bless you. Someone needs to say bless you. We've sung it, we speak it all the time, and we throw it over. We know it's positive, it's a good thing to bless you. And as I'm reading into this language, understanding bless, it says there on the bottom to say, because it's helpful to understand, the blessing here is not just talking about a material thing. It's not talking about wealth. It's not talking about money. It's not talking about gold, but even though it can include that, that's way too small. It's talking about being blessed by God as a way of coming under God's care, coming under his protection, and coming under his favor. And so you can imagine Abraham, who's called to leave, and God saying, I will bless you. I will care for you. You're going into the unknown. I will care for you. I will look after you. I will protect you as you go into that unknown, as you go into that land of other gods and other nations, and you're probably scared. I will protect you and you will have my favor. God's care, God's protection, and God's favor. I will bless. But also note the next one is saying, I will bless you, and as I bless you, what happens? You will be a blessing. This blessing is not a one-way thing that Abraham holds on to and it's like it's all mine. It's from day one meant to be a blessing, God's blessing, his protection, his favor on Abraham's life to flow to those around him. And we see this if you read Genesis, you can do this afterwards. You see that Abraham blesses Lot a few chapters later, looks after him, gives him favor over himself. He blesses him. And also, we can continue going on, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. From day one, God's blessing was on his people for the sake of other people as well. In day one, God's plan was to have a people which would be a source of living water to other nations as well. And we can track that. We don't have time. We can track that all through the Old Testament and into the New Testament. If we look at Moses and we look at the law, we can look at King David and we look at the temple, and all of that at its best was God's blessing, God's favor, God's protection on his people, and at its best, flowing out to bless others. At its worst, kept to itself. God has always had a heart from day one to restore all of humanity to himself, and doing that through his people. God is at work all through the scriptures. Ultimately, as we know, and many people in this room we know, we see this in the person of Jesus, who is in the line of Abraham, enabling, dying on the cross, that all people could be blessed through him. And Galatians 3 beautifully talks about this promise to Abraham having complete fulfillment in the person of Christ, that the Gentiles, that the nations would be blessed as well. God is at work. God is bringing justice. God is bringing shalom. God is bringing salvation through his church, through his people, to all. John 20:21. I love this verse. And Jesus says it. It's not on the slide or anything like that. Actually, I might go to the next slide just to have that picture up again. Jesus goes, and he's died, he's risen again, he's reappearing. And Jesus says this, he goes, peace be with you, shalom. As the Father has sent me, and he's saying that God the Father sent Jesus to earth to play his role in this story that God is working out of seeing all people blessed. As the Father sent Jesus, Jesus then looks at his disciples and looks at his church and goes, and I send you. And then he breathes his Holy Spirit on them. Because being sent involves power, not our own works and our own spirit. There is something about when I look at that picture for myself. It's where I live. It's where my friends are. It's where I work. It's where I go to the gym. It's where I go to the beach. It's where I have a coffee. It's where my life is. But as I read this, there's an element where this is also where I'm sent to. Doesn't mean that changes what I do, but there is an element that I'm here for a reason. Some people are sent and there's an obvious calling. I've got a friend and he's sent to Russia and they've been living in Russia. I've got a friend who was sent to different places and they've gone there. And as somebody put it, he goes, you're either sent to somewhere, or if you're not sent to somewhere, you're already where you're meant to be sent to. And that's right here. And so there's an element that we as God's church are sent right here. We're placed right in the middle of it. We've got a property right here, just from here, to be part of God's story that he's working on. And this is all through the New Testament, different languages of being someone who is blessed that then blesses others. You may just want to call it to making disciples. You may just want to call it being a witness from Acts. You may want to call it salt and light. You may want to call it flowing of living water. New Testament uses different metaphors to really talk about this same concept that God's favor is on his people and that is meant to flow to all. And we do this all in the really, really simple context of what it means to love God and to love our neighbor. But if you're like me, this concept of mission and or evangelism and all these different things that promote so many different emotions and thoughts and histories and stories. I know for me, when I think of mission, I always feel guilty. Am I doing it enough? Am I doing it right? Don't see much fruit around me. I always feel guilty. Maybe you're like that. Or embarrassment. Maybe you think of church history, and I know the church has got a horrible history of being a witness for Christ by the sword, by power, by gains, by manipulation, and it's atrocious. Maybe deep in your heart or in the back of your mind, or maybe even in your words, you think it's actually inappropriate in today's world. Maybe you think it's inappropriate in today's multicultural world where there's lots of people with different thoughts, it's inappropriate. Maybe you even think it's morally wrong. I know a lot of people in the more secular side of things today would say that's what's wrong with the world today, people who are trying to change other people's views. That's actually not inappropriate or bad, it's actually what's wrong with the world. And I've had many work colleagues, not here, just to clarify, in other environments, who would say that is what's wrong. You've got a stance and you're trying to change other people's stances. Why can't we just be tolerant? Why can't we just get along? Why can't you just do your thing and let me do my thing? And this is interesting. There's a Youth Alpha. So Alpha, Blake talked about the Alpha course before, and they did some recent statistics, largely based in Canada and North America, and looking at young people. And in this thing of young people are under 35. So if you're 36, you're old, sorry. So, and in this, they basically go, of these young people, 98% of them say that witnessing is something that's important to them. And the same number, 98% of them say that people, not them, but other people meeting Jesus is probably the most special thing that could happen to someone. And then quickly it drops after this. Of those people, 95% of those young Christians say, yes, I know what to do. Yes, I feel confident to know how to talk about my faith with my friends, with people that ask questions. And a lot of them would say that, yeah, I'm sort of gifted in it as well. And here's where I find a thing. 50% of them, so half of Christians that took this survey, and it was a proper survey, not 4 people and 2 people said this, 50% of people said, but it's inappropriate to share my faith in a way to hope that it will change other people's faith in today's world. Half of young Christians living in America and Canada said that, even though they'd say that it's something that they want to do and something that's really, really valuable. We're living in a very interesting time globally. There is a lot going on. So the question I'm left with is, how do we approach this beautiful thing of I'm blessed by God, I'm saved by God, I'm under his favor and under his care. And I've got this responsibility to reflect that, not just keep it to myself. Just like if I have a really good cup of coffee, I tell someone to go try it out. I know a really good Jesus and I want people to try it out. I want them to taste and know that he's good. So how do we approach this task in today's world where maybe doing it is looked upon as a moral wrong? And it's changed from generation to generation. I know myself, when I first came to faith many, many years ago, when I was around 17, someone at church tapped me on the shoulder and this is recently after I came to faith, and they go, I think you might be a gifted evangelist. And I had to look it up on the thing, what is this? I don't know, didn't know. Do you know, like when you first have faith, and some people grow up in the church and know lots of words, and I didn't. I didn't know any words. And you sit there and go, what is everyone talking about? Some people need a little cheat book on the side. But I looked at that and I'm like, oh, maybe I trust this person. And so I went to courses and I learned lots. Maybe reading books, learned scripts nearly. And it trained me into be a really, really good converter of people. Try to maybe go convert people all the time. I could win nearly any argument. You know, I knew all the arguments. I knew their arguments. I knew the hole in their arguments. I would have been a great lawyer if you would have a law court for that type of thing. And it gave me a hunger. It gave me a passion to do it, which was great. And I remember at uni, I was meeting with a guy, and I still remember his name, Ross. And we met, and I met up with him for like an hour and a half each week for like 4 weeks. It was mutual, he wanted to. And we'd sit there and we would chat. And the chat was not a nice chat, it was pretty heated. There was a bit of heat in it. He had questions and I had answers. He had more questions and I had more answers. He had statements and I had arguments against his statements. And we'd met up and then we'd break and then we'd have another week. And we'd come back again. He's done a bit more research. I've done a bit more research, you know, at university last night. And it was like that. And I remember then I got to around week 4 it was, and I go, I've got him. Everything he said, I've beaten. You know, and I was like, and then I go, and I got to the station, so do you want to come? Do you want to follow Jesus? Do you want to believe that Jesus is God? And he just, I remember this moment, he just looked at me and he goes, Matt, I actually don't really care. And I'm like, what have you been talking the last 4 weeks and that? And he was just in the university, and it was a horrible moment for me. And I'm just like, what have I been doing? And with a bit of hindsight, I'm going, this course had left me to be this militant, aggressive arguer of truth in a way that didn't really reflect Jesus very well at all. This guy just wanted to have debates. He had no interest actually in coming to faith. And even though I won, it was a big loss. It says in John 16 that the Holy Spirit's job is to convict and to convert people to follow him. We can desire this. It says in 1 Timothy 2:4 that we should desire that people come to him. But in me chatting to my friend Ross, I was overstepping my card and trying to play the card of God and do what only God can do, that is convert someone. And I'm not saying it's wrong to chat. I'm not saying it's wrong to have good conversation about big questions, but I know in my spirit that I wasn't actually doing that out of a place of love. I wasn't doing that out of a place of being a blessing. I wasn't doing that out of a place of compassion. I was doing that out of a place of converting this person because that's what that course had taught me to do. I could have been a J-dub knocking on the door. I could have been anyone. I've had times in my life where I've swung to the other extreme, where I've gone, I'm just going to be really, really nice. And the nicer I am, the bigger impact I'm going to have. And I've made a lot of meals and mowed a lot of lawns and babysat a lot of kids and dropped money under a lot of doors and painted walls and done lots of nice things. Good things, not wrong things at all. Things that I still do today. But most of the time it's led to a lot of people going, gee, Matt, you're really, really nice. And no one saying Jesus is really, really good. And nice isn't a fruit of the Spirit either. It's just a thing. And so how do we go about being a witness? How do we go about being someone who's blessed by God and blessing those around us? How do we go about loving God and loving neighbor? And I would want to argue that I think it's as simple as being a blessing. And this is what we're diving into over the next 6 weeks, keeping it really super simple, getting that sketch of the bull for our faith and for evangelism. There's some clear, simple things. How can I be a blesser? So we're not going to be doing some fancy course. We're not going to be learning some apologetic arguments. And if you want, they're not wrong. We're keeping it super simple, and we're just going to be looking at the person of Jesus. We're going to look at the Gospels and see how he engaged deeply with the people around him. And we're going to see how Jesus engaged primarily starting from an outpouring of prayer in his own life. Jesus was moved from love, and we've seen this in the series we've looked at. He looked at the rich young ruler and he loved him. He looked at this person and was moved to compassion. When I looked at my friend Ross, I was moved with no emotion at all, except wanting to win an argument. And a lot of that comes out of a place of prayer. So we're going to look, we'll bring it back up again, Eli. And the B stands for beginning with prayer. It's a sneaky way to get prayer in something. But we'll see that. And so if we want to be a light and salt and be blessing, it all flows out of prayer. And as we pray for those around us and we pray for those people on our street, often God gives us a heart for those people in our street. And it comes from a place of love. It comes from a place of compassion because God has done the same work in us. And we'll see how Jesus, and this is what I'm wrestling with myself, how well Jesus listened. If you read the Gospels carefully, Jesus was a brilliant listener. He could see past some questions and answer the real question. But also how many times he just asked questions and didn't even speak. Jesus asked way more questions than he answered. And so listening well, and in today's world when everyone's got an opinion and everyone's got something to share and everyone speaks over the top of each other and the noise gets louder and louder and louder, in Jesus' example of listening well to the people that we love, even just in our own families and even here and also out there. We're going to look at eating and how Jesus ate. It's not just a thing that we do 21 times a day if we do proper meals, or if you're like me, like 100 times a day, a little bit. But how Jesus ate and how there's something beautiful about the table and there's something spiritual about the table and how we can use our eating to bless and to share and to love. We're going to look how does Jesus served and how he did serve. But also how he shared who the Father was and how he did that. Jesus was so deeply embedded in people's lives. It's interesting in Matthew 11, or you can see it in Luke 7 as well, there's this accusation the religious leaders throw at Jesus. And it's a really interesting accusation. There's lots of accusations. I wonder if people could throw accusations at you, what it would be. the accusation that Jesus got would be, the first one is that he was a glutton and that he was a drunkard. It gives you a little indication of how Jesus spent a chunk of his time, and that was with people, eating and drinking. It's not saying he was, but that was where he was. He was at the cafe, he was at the wedding banquet, he was with people. And it also says that he was the friend of tax collectors. So he was the friend of people who were on the outskirts of society, even though they may have been wealthy. And he was the friend of sinners, those who were morally against the religious leaders at the time. And I love the fact that he uses the word friend. It didn't say that he had a ministry to tax collectors. It didn't say that he had a program he was running, but he was a friend. He knew them and they knew him. He was in their life and he ate and he listened and he served and he shared and he loved and he was a blessing as the Father blessed him. And so as I look for steps for myself to navigating, how can I just simply be a blessing? How can I be salt and light? How can I witness well? One way to think of it is it just as simple as being a really, really good friend to those around me? Is it as simple as being a really, really good friend and loving and listening and blessing and serving, but also sharing? Philip Yancey, which some of you may know, an author, wrote a book years ago called What's So Amazing About Grace. Some of you have probably read it. And he summarizes this in this few beautiful little metaphors, just as I finish up. And he goes, that we as God's people are not just meant to be beneficiaries of grace, but we're meant to be agents of grace. We're not meant to be collectors of it. We're always meant to be dispensers of it. We're not meant to be cisterns of living water that keeps it to myself so I'm all good. We're meant to be aqueducts where it flows to those around us. We're not meant to solely be receivers. We're also meant to be agents. We're meant to be people who are saved by grace, characterized by grace, but also channels of his grace. We're simply meant to be blessed blessers. It's actually interesting. I was looking in my diary the other day, and I realized that I guess my family and I, we've been here around a year now in this church. We started in the beginning of lockdown last year, so it's around the year anniversary. And it's half in lockdown, half in person roughly. So, and I've grown to get to know the people in this community, in this room, and some people are new in that time as well, and other people have been here a while. And one thing I love about the people in this room is we're an authentic community. We're not trying to be anything else. We're not trying to put on a fancy show. You know, we sing for videos, we have a cup of tea, but we're God's people. God has blessed us. And even though maybe you may say we're a small group, we have great power here because God has blessed us. And if we just literally walk out that door, follow him, and seek to bless those around him, I think we can have a significant impact. As we as a church stand together and honour him, people will just be drawn to the life. And as we send each other out to our workplaces, in our streets, in our homes, and as we live by following him, and then just quite normally just blessing those around us in all those different ways. I truly believe that when we see that picture of Bondi, which we'll bring up again one night, that we can see so much beauty going on for the gospel of the kingdom of God in this area. It doesn't have to be fancy and crazy and shiny. It just has to be authentic and as simple as loving God well and loving our neighbour faithfully and authentically.